Hi, it's Mo. It is time to do another Basement Box Books unboxing. So I have many boxes of books in my basement that have been in the basement, barely touched for the most part, since we moved in 2015. And this year in 2024, I have been going through all of those books. I've been seeing if they're books that I still want, hopefully unhauling a lot of them, but the majority of them have been ending up back in the basement. I also sometimes put books on my TBR, and I also sometimes put books on my shelves of books that I've already read, my read shelves, because they are books that never ended up there when I originally did my library. So today we have two small boxes of books to go through. I think there's a lot of comics in here. There's usually comics, which I end up keeping. There's usually some Sherlock Holmes books, which I end up giving away. There's sometimes some books that are my husband's that we have to double check with him. We're trying to unhaul. We're trying to organize and minimize, or at least lessen, the amount of books that we are putting back in the basement. And ideally we're not putting too much on my current TBR because I have over 600 books on my current TBR at the moment. But I do really want to go through all these books and make sure that they're still books that I want, and if they're not books that I want, I can go ahead and unhaul them. I have unhauled over 100 books from this project so far, and I have opened at least 23 boxes, I think, at this point. And in this project, we've looked at more than 500 books. So let's look at a few more. Here we have Crowd. This is a literary magazine. I've been mostly keeping the literary magazines just because sometimes they're mine, sometimes they're my husband's, but they always have some interesting stuff in them. The next book I see is Flight. This is also a collection, an anthology, but this is of comics and graphic novels. So these I've also been keeping for the most part, unless I really don't want them. I think Flight was actually one that I knew someone who did some work in that. Next we have a Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont tour book. This is the 2007 edition. I've been keeping a lot of the tour books that I found. Not that I found that many in these unboxings, but this one I think I'm going to go ahead and give away. I love Maine and New Hampshire, and I very much love Vermont. I used to go to Vermont every year with my mom, but I don't really need a guidebook, and I certainly don't need a guidebook from 2007. This is the Indiana Jones Omnibus Volume 2. This is also a comic. I think I'll keep this for now, put it in the comic section, but maybe we'll get rid of it at some point. Another project that I might do soon, that I might start soon, is going through all of my comics and trying to get rid of as many comics as I can. Here's a Sherlock Holmes book. So our good friend gave us a bunch of Sherlock Holmes books, and I have read some since I've been doing this project, but mostly I've been letting them go because there's no way that I can get to all the Sherlock Holmes books that we have. So this is The Lost Cases by Alvin F. Rimshaw. Apparently he is a indie author and a veteran who lives in St. Croix. That's awesome for him, but I am going to unhaul this one. Another thing that we have a ton of is vintage sci-fi books, because my dad has given us a bunch of vintage sci-fi books over the years at various times and places. Someone in this one got to chapter 2. This one is nice because it has sprayed edges just on the top. This is Beyond the Barrier by Damon Knight. I've never read any Damon Knight, but I have had quite a few of his books from these basement box haul, unboxing, haul, and unhauls, or from just picking up vintage editions. This one looks kind of interesting. I think I'm going to go ahead and keep this one, but it'll definitely be going down in the basement. This is Da Capo, Best Music Writing of 2001 by Nick Hornsby. I definitely don't want this. Gonna unhaul it. Another Sherlock Holmes. This is The Painful Prediction of Alice Faulkner, written and illustrated by Brett M. Herholtz. This looks like it's a graphic novel. This one looks kind of interesting. I like the art, so I'm gonna keep that one, put it in the basement. Another Sherlock Holmes. This is Sherlock Holmes Volume 2. This is like the Sherlock Holmes. Oh, interesting. Okay, wait, I'm very confused. This is an illustrated version of Sherlock Holmes' work, and it does say that it's written by Arthur Conan Doyle, so I guess this is one of the books that he actually wrote, and it's just illustrated. I don't need to keep this one. I have several volumes of Sherlock Holmes' work that he wrote that I always keep around. Here's a good one, Gorillas in the Mist, or Woman in the Mist, the story of Diane Fossey and the Mountain Gorillas of Africa by Fairleigh Mowat. I love Fairleigh Mowat. He was a Canadian author who wrote a lot of, or he might still be, I'm not sure if he's still alive, but he wrote a lot of nature writing. He wrote one of my all-time favorite books, Never Cry Wolf. He writes a lot of nonfiction. He writes fiction too. We're definitely keeping this one, and this one can actually go on the TBR. Imbibe by David Wondrich. It looks to be a nonfiction about imbibing, about liquor. The byline is From Absinthe Cocktail to Whiskey Smash, a salute in stories and drinks to Professor Jerry Thomas, pioneer of the American bar. So this is a really interesting one, but definitely one I'm not going to get to anytime soon, and I don't think I need to keep it. A Death in Brooklyn by Terry Quinn. I don't know if I've ever actually seen before. It seems like it's almost a little bit Gossip Girly. It's about two neighbors who see a murder, and then there is a gossip columnist who is who might know more than they're letting on. This one sounds kind of interesting. I think I'll keep it but put it back in the basement. Here's another literary magazine. It has a picture of the baby on the cover, which is gross, but I will put it in the basement. Here's Black Elk Speaks, which is a nonfiction book, I think all about Black Elk. I don't think it was actually written by him, but this seems like it was probably for a college course or something. I'm going to keep this one. I might put this one on the TBR. The last book from that box is 13 Clocks by James Thurber. James Thurber is a humorist, and this is a middle grade book by him. I probably got this from my mom because she really likes James Thurber. It has some cool illustrations. We'll definitely keep this one. I think I will put it in my young adult section on my TBR. There were 15 books in that box. We're putting 3 on the TBR. 6 are going back in the basement. Those are mostly literary magazines though. We have 1 maybe, and then we have 5 that are getting unhauled. That was a little box. The next box I had to decant because the box was totally destroyed. Here we have Animal Habit by Tawny Smith. This is one that I think I either knew the artist or I got at a art fair. We're definitely going to keep this one and put it back in and put it with our comics. David Rakoff's Love, Dishonor, Marry, Die, Cherish, Perish, a novel. We've seen a book before by David Rakoff. This one is partly illustrated. It has like a step back cover and it has some illustrations in it. I really don't want this book. Here is a Japanese manga, but it is in Japanese. I was for a while collecting works in Japanese when I found them. This one can go back in the basement. A Golden Circle by Jerome Lawrence has a Klimt work on the cover. I've seen this work in person. It's beautiful. I vaguely think I wanted to read this, so I'm going to have to do a little research. If this was a want to read, I'm going to keep it and I'll put it on the TBR. If it was not a want to read, I will probably end up unhauling it. Here is a Thanksgiving card from my in-laws. Does it have a date? 2016. Fun. Nature's World of Wonders is a coffee table style book with different illustrations in it. Very beautiful. This was either for our reference collection or it was for cut up, but either way we're keeping it. I will put it on the reference shelf for now. Civilization by Kenneth Clark is probably the same. We either grabbed it used or had it for the art in it so that we could cut up and make collage out of them, or it was just an art book that we liked. So again, it'll go on our reference shelves. This is cool. It is Cowboy Bebop #1, which is very exciting. It is the English version, which is cool. So I've never read Cowboy Bebop. I did watch the first episode of the manga when the Netflix show came out because I watched the first episode of the Netflix show as well. I thought it was really interesting. I think this one can stay out and go on my TBR. Another Japanese manga in Japanese. Another Japanese manga in Japanese. Here is The Never-Ending Story by Michael Ende, translated by Ralph Manheim. I did not know that The Never-Ending Story was a translated work. That's really interesting in and of itself. I didn't know that I had this book. That sounds cool. I think I'll keep this out and put it on my TBR. I have The Last Unicorn on my TBR, which was an animated movie that I used to love as a kid, and I used to love the movie of A Never-Ending Story. Both horribly sad, both terrifying in parts, but maybe it would be fun to like do a reading vlog where I read both of those. Next we have Cujo by Stephen King. I've only ever read one Stephen King, so I am not interested in keeping this one. I'll double check with my husband because he likes Stephen King, but this can be an unhaul. Ooh, Here is Octavia Butler Imago. This is a classic vintage sci-fi. The vintage covers, I wish they didn't always make the people white for Octavia Butler, who is a black author, but I do love Octavia Butler and I do have a collection of hers, so I think this can actually stay out and go on the TBR. I think this is part of the Xenogenesis series, which I read the first of, which was called Dawn. So this is probably a continuation of this. I don't know where in the series it is, but it's exciting that I have another book in that series. Oh, this sounds really cool. A Pocket Treasury of American Folklore, edited by B.A. Botkin. This is very cool vintage copy, sprayed edges, and seems like just a lot of different folklore from the Americas. So definitely keeping that. I will put it in the basement. This is another fun vintage book. It is The Great Chili Confrontation by H. Allen Smith. It is another vintage sprayed edge paperback, mass market paperback. I've never heard of this. I don't know anything about it, but I think it's worth keeping in the basement to check out at another time. This is a vintage mystery, Where There's a Will by Rex Stout. I've never read any of his Nero Wolfe stories, but this is a great vintage copy, so probably a great place to start. Sprayed edges. We'll keep this one in the basement. Once Upon a Time in the North by Philip Pullman. I'm not sure if that's actually part of his Dark Materials collection or if it is part of his other series, which is in the same universe, or part of his other series, which is not. This one's interesting though because it's like mixed media. I have read his Dark Materials. I really did enjoy that series, and I have a few other like supplementary books in that series, but I've never read them, and this one is the same. So I'm going to put this one back in the basement, but I am going to hold on to it. Here is A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. I have never read any Mark Twain. I'm not super interested in Mark Twain, but like this one I think I would keep, but I think I might have already unboxed this one in one of these boxes. I'm going to put this on the maybe pile. I'm going to see if I've already kept a version of this. If I have, I will let this one go. Then we have a copy of Franny and Zooey. I've only ever read A Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, but my friend Avery says this is the best book, so I will keep this one, but I will put it back in the basement. And here we have a Sri Isopen's Isad, which is a spiritual book by an Indian spiritual leader. This one is very cool, but I don't think it's something that I would ever read, and it is something that I see often like in little free libraries, so I'm going to go ahead and unhaul this one. Here's a baseball digest. That's probably my husband's. We'll talk to him about that, or it'll go on our baseball shelf. Here's another copy of The Fabulous Riverboat by Philip Jose Farmer. I keep all the Philip Jose Farmers. I have some other books in the Riverworld series in this coverway, I think. So I'm gonna keep this one. I'm gonna put it on my red shelf. I think I've read this one. Yeah, because this is book 2. So I think I've read book 1, 2, and 3 in my life. One more than the others. And then I think I have some others that are on the red shelf. So this will go on the red shelf. Here we have short novels by John Steinbeck. Let's see what's in this collection. Tortilla Flat, The Red Pony of Mice and Men, The Moon is Down, Cannery Row, and The Pearl. All great books. I have read Tortilla Flat, The Red Pony, some of The Pearl, definitely Cannery Row, which is one of my favorite Steinbeck novels. I have never read Of Mice and Men or The Moon is Down, but I definitely will keep this one. I think this one can go ahead and go on my red shelf as well. I don't think this was my book. It might have been my husband's, but it is Manifestos of Surrealism by Andre Breton, translated by Richard Seaver and Helen R. Lane. This one sounds really interesting. It looks like someone drew a picture in the book, which is interesting. I'm going to keep this one, but I'm going to put it in the basement. Here's a work of poetry, Cats of the Temple, poems by Brad Liethauser. This one looks really cool. I don't know anything about it or this author, but I'm going to keep it out. I'm going to put it on my TBR. Next is a vintage copy of Nuts in May by Cornelia Otis Skinner. This seems to have illustrations. These remind me of like the old like Playboy illustrations, which might be where this one came from. This is a very cool vintage book. We're going to keep it, but we're going to put it in the basement. Here's a book of Neil Gaiman's Odd and the Frost Giants. I've unboxed a lot of Neil Gaiman in this series. I do like Neil Gaiman. I really liked American Gods. I love Good Omens, but I haven't read a lot. I liked Stardust. There was a few others that I've read. I'm going to keep this one, but I am going to keep it in the basement because I don't feel any urge to get to Neil Gaiman. And the last book in this unboxing is Upstairs Downstairs, a novel by John Hawksworth, which I think is the novel that inspired the long-running Australian TV show. I've never seen that one. I think they did a redo of it, a updated version of it not too long ago. It's very much like Downton Abbey. It's all about the servants and the masters in big houses in England or Australia. I will definitely keep this one, but I will definitely put it in the basement. That box had 27 books in it, and we are unhauling 3. 2 are maybes. We're putting quite a bit, 4 on the TBR. 2 are going on the red shelf, and 1 comic. The rest are going in the basement. So not overly productive. Altogether, we only got rid of 8 books that are definitely getting unhauled, but at least we unhauled some books. We are definitely getting down to the end of these basement box books. This was box number 25 and 26 for those who are counting, and I have, I think, 1 more box that's like I packed a long time ago, and then there are 3 or 4 boxes that I packed in 2022 or 2023. Some of these boxes have been ones that I packed during my time on BookTube. Most of them have not been. So I was kind of waiting to do the books that I already packed up in the last year or so till the end. So we're getting to that point where the end boxes that are probably less are going to get unhauled because they were packed more recently. So let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned here. Let me know if you think I should prioritize any of them. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!